to get started, if I could, it would be great for folks that aren't driving or are in a good place if they could turn their cameras on. I would love to be able to see as many faces as possible. So anybody that can help with that. Yes, Terry, you were first. Saxton marked Terry down, and Bob was not far behind. So thanks everybody for being able to do that. What I'd like to do to start is just share a poll. Can everybody see that? Yep, thanks Cassandra for the thumbs up. And I'll just give everybody, there's a code at the top if you'd like to enter that, and then I'll just wait and this will populate folks' answers. And if folks are having trouble putting it in Mentimeter, feel free to enter it into the chat as well. Here we go. Can everybody see those answers coming onto the screen? Great. Setting boundaries, athletes listening, what gets conveyed. Oh yeah, from coach to athlete parent. Love that one. Getting the real answers, not the one they think I want to hear. Yes. Generational differences, personal emotions. These are great. And here is one more question I want to answer. I want some answers on as well. Let me go to the next slide. How about this one? What comes to mind when you hear motivational interviewing? Terry's laughing. I love it. I can't, I wish I, well, we might have to have you come off mute.
Ben, motivational interviewing doesn't seem very exciting, but I bet you're going to show us different.
Yes, Terry, I love a challenge. Sitting across a desk, emotional, passion, encouragement, face-to-face conversation, caring, open-minded, inspiring. We'll give this another couple minutes, couple seconds. Trying to peel back a layer. Yes. Compassion, accurate, open-ended question. All right, so we have some people with some experience with MI already. This is good. Really cool. Okay, thank you, everybody. Let me share my presentation. Give me just a second to pull this up. All right. And can everybody see that slide right there? Yes, awesome. Okay, so as Saxton said, my name's Ben Freakley, and what I want everybody to know about you is I've been a coach for over 20 years. Just quick background. I was a college soccer player, went right into college soccer coaching, did that for about 15 years. And along the way, really struggled as a coach with the psychological, mental aspect of the game. Personally, as a little disclosure here, had a hard time learning how to regulate my own attention and emotions, but also really wanted to know how to help my team do that. So in 2010, I transitioned into the field of sport and performance psychology. From there, went on to work with the Army Rangers. My first full-time job in sport and performance psychology was with Special Operations Forces. And from there, had an opportunity to go work in pro baseball. I spent 5 seasons working with the Toronto Blue Jays, Canada's team. And there went even deeper into sport and performance psych. Ended up getting my doctoral degree in sport and performance psychology with an emphasis in clinical mental health counseling. And for the last year now, I have been out on my own. I have my own practice and work mostly with professional and college teams on anything that has to do with the mental, social, and emotional aspects of sport. And this topic is deeply meaningful to me because it was a game changer, one that I wish I would have learned about when I was a college soccer coach. I first learned about this term, motivational interviewing, in 2014 when I was working with the Army Rangers. And ever since then, I have adopted it as kind of the base of my coaching philosophy. Anytime I'm working with an athlete or a coach or a business executive, a line they will hear from me word for word is, you are the expert on your own life. And if you don't take anything out of this presentation today or our time together, to me, that is at the heart of motivational interviewing, is really seeing people as the expert on their own life. When I decided to do this presentation, I called one of the professional athletes that I work with, and he gave me his permission to share a little bit of his story. This is Lewis Hilton. He's a center midfielder for the Tampa Bay Rowdies, if there's any soccer fans here. And I just asked him, I said, Lewis, in your own words, could you tell me what it's like to work with me? Because I thought if I was going to give a talk to a bunch of coaches on motivational interviewing, I'd love to hear firsthand from the athlete, does this stuff work? And I said, Lewis, what do you remember about us working together? And this is a direct quote from Lewis. You know, when I first started working with him, I asked him a lot of open-ended questions. Tell me about your journey. Where did it start? What do you remember about when you first fell in love with the game? And he shared these beautiful, rich stories about being in the backyard and kicking the ball around and thinking he was David Beckham, and what it was like to play in front of his dad and the bond that he and his dad had. I have goosebumps right now retelling the story, and I'm not even there with Lewis right now. But then he shared something that was really interesting to me afterwards. He said, you know, Ben, most of the time when we get off a call, I'm hoping a game is going to kick off 5 minutes later because I'm so motivated to play. And I don't have to tell all of you on the call today, all of us coaches, our interactions that we have with our players, the conversations that we have, are any attempts that we make to connect, have a profound impact on motivation. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So motivational interviewing, I love this quote from Blaise Pascal. People are better persuaded by the reasons they have themselves discovered than by those that come into the mind of others. And I think that quote from the French philosopher beautifully backs up what MI is all about, is that deep, deep down inside, people are going to be a lot more likely to trust the things that inspire them and motivate them and the reasons they may have for sustaining or changing if they feel like that comes from within. And what we have an opportunity to do as coaches is set players up to talk about this. There's something really empowering about speaking out loud to another about the aspirations that you have for your life. Some definitions of MI. Motivational interviewing is a communication style with techniques that allow you to draw out the wisdom and answers from athletes. And we're going to get into some of those techniques and styles a little bit later on. In its simplest form, MI is a conversation about change. And also, MI is a collaborative, goal-oriented style of communication with particular attention to the language of change. So much of my job as a mental performance coach, when I'm working with a performer, or if I were working with you, Allison, as a coach, or Bob as a coach, so much of my listening would be around your language. I would be listening for phrases that you use that might give me some hints about where you are in life, about what's important, about where you're stuck, about what you're curious about. And then my job is to kind of latch on and set performers up to go a little bit deeper with some of those explorations. So you see some of the key words in here. It's a collaborative style. One of my favorite phrases to use when I'm talking with coaches about how to motivate their teams is people are a lot more likely to commit to what they help create. And, a lot of times we could probably do a whole session on what are some of the barriers that make it tough for coaches, time being one of them. Hey, Ben, I don't have a lot of time. Sometimes things are mission critical. I need to pass on technical or tactical information. I don't really have time to hear the player's insight on that. And, what you may feel from me today is some of the challenge, or a little bit of a gentle pushback on that. And in that the trade-off for that time is that you may get a lot deeper inspiration, motivation, or commitment to change or sustain from a player in a desired path just by taking that collaborative approach. Where I probably saw this the most, or where I've witnessed this the most, is in a pro sport environment. I've seen the two pro teams that I work with right now are Atlanta United in the MLS and the Tampa Bay Rowdies. And these are players, some of them have 10, 15 years as a pro. They have experiences and situations, and they have ambitions of their own. And I've seen coaches have a lot of success or struggle depending on how they approach these athletes. And I just want to ask really quick, just put in the chat, if you were to try, maybe describe how you got coached, if some of you can remember back that far. What do you remember about being coached when you were coming up as an athlete? If you could just throw that in the chat really quick. Question is, what do you remember? I remember adults loving their sharing of the game. Thank you, Megan. Being instructed. About a couple more. Not being heard. Playing for a coach with winning being the only goal. Being motivated to play together, hard nose, learn the basics. These are great. So we had some different experiences in there. I can definitely share mine was a very directive style of coaching growing up. I played a little bit of basketball, a little bit of baseball, and a lot of soccer. And I grew up remembering, especially now as I reflect back on it, that things were very telling, very instructing, a very directive style. And naturally, if that's what we grew up with, or if as assistant coaches, if we watched head coaches do that, a lot of times we as coaches, if we're not careful, we will default to adopting that. And in some cases, it may work great. It may work great. I know for me, these approaches to motivational interviewing, the collaborative spirit behind it, the setting an athlete up to talk about what she wants and why she plays, Those are things that were never modeled to me. Those were things that I never experienced as a player. And that's why I think I'm so passionate about sharing it now. I had a college player reach out to me in the spring of 22, so just not too long ago, and he was ready to transfer. He was for all the college coaches that are on here, we know the restrictions that the NCAA put on what teams are and are not allowed to do when they're out of season. So this was a player from another country, thought he was coming over here to play soccer, and all of a sudden it's spring. The roster's diminished. They're only allowed to play 5 games. He's looking around saying, this is not for me. And so we got on, and I said, how do you think I could help? And he said, well, I'm not really sure. I just know that I'm not really happy here right now. And one of you put in the Mentimeter poll question earlier, that phrase, peel back the layers. And so we went deeper on that. We went into questions of, why do you play? And, where's your focus on right now? Which he shared to me right now, that the focus was on all the things that he did not like and all the things that he was not enjoying. And I said, what do you think that means? And he reflected, maybe my focus is in the wrong place. Maybe it's on negative things. Long story short, with a lot of those types of questions and conversations, that player, deep down inside, my agenda was hoping, I have to admit this, that he would stay and stick it out. I think as coaches, we all love the stories of persistence and perseverance and don't quit, grind it out. And he didn't. He stayed. And when I was in working with the team just a couple weeks ago, he was in a completely different place. But in order to get there, I needed to let him find the way. I had an executive tell me this morning that a lot of our work is about me setting him up to find the answers that he can trust. So just a long-winded way of saying it's a collaborative style with a goal orientation in mind. Motivational interviewing is encouraging the athlete to become an active participant in the change process, evoking their intrinsic reasons for change or motivation to change. I don't know any coach out there that if I were having a conversation with all of you right now, you'd say, Ben, accountability and ownership are high on my list, right? I think we would all agree that in order for teams and athletes to be successful, taking ownership over their career, being accountable for decisions that they make is really important. The question, though, is being accountable for whose decisions and being accountable for whose goals. Now, I don't want to get too nerdy here, right? So I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, but really what I want us to understand in terms of the factors that underpin motivation is that motivation works on a continuum. And on the far left end, we can see in that black box, that's a motivation. There is no motivation there. None exists. And some of us maybe even have experienced that in our own life as an athlete or as a coach. I can definitely say there were times when I was coaching at Virginia Military Institute. That's one of the schools where I was head coach for a couple years. And it didn't take much more than a string of tough results, tough losses, or recruits saying, no, thanks, coach. I'd rather not wear a uniform for 4 years and sleep in a cot for my motivation to really be challenged. But what I really want to focus in on is if you look at those 4 boxes in the middle, we know over on the right end, we're really familiar with intrinsic motivation, things that we do for the sake of doing it. I imagine many of you on the call today are here just because you want to be. You might want to get better as a coach. This topic might be interested in you, or you may be interested in it, but I'm doubting you were told to be here. That would bring up a very different experience than the one you might have now. In those middle 4 boxes, the source of motivation is really important in the performer, or in our case, our athlete's journey. Externally regulated things That's like punishment or reward. We're familiar with that. Hey, if you do this, you'll get that. If you don't do this, you're going to get that. But if you look at the orange and the yellow, that's where athletes, they may be able to get behind these ideas a little bit. One of the biggest things that comes to mind for me is when athletes have to do a fitness test, right? Preseason, I want you to run this far in this amount of time. They may not be very motivated to do that, but they're able to assign a meaning behind it. Hey, if I do this, this may increase my chance of getting more playing time. Or if I do this, I may, the coach is going to be happy with me. So she's going to be like, okay, this person's committed. Where I feel like we could go deeper as coaches is going from the yellow to the green box is when we ask questions like, what does fitness have to do with your performance goals? Or away from the team, what does being fit mean to you? And you may get some different answers from players on that. I know anytime I'm having a conversation with a professional athlete about their goals, I have to ask questions about why they're doing it. I have to ask questions about what makes it worth it to stay late and to get up early and to make all these sacrifices. I think I know the answer to those, but what matters most is setting them up to say out loud why this matters. And I don't think we do this enough. A lot of times, I think as coaches, we make assumptions that players are going to be motivated to do these things, and they may. But I think we get a different experience when we set them up to talk out loud and listen to their language for the reasons of why they do what they do. The other thing we need to know is the three biggest sources of motivation. And this comes from two researchers, Deci and Ryan, that for probably 40-ish years now have been researching this question of what motivates people. And what they found across all ages, stages, different countries, different cultures, different genders, these three things hold up. People are motivated by autonomy, competence, and relatedness. The number one, we all like to have a sense of control. Like that feels good to us. Second, we like to have an opportunity to have a mastery over something. I think back to when I was that youth player, and I would get home from my team practice and I would go outside, and I was that kid knocking the soccer ball off the brick wall in the garage over and over and over and over because I wanted to be really, really good. And there's coaches out there. I talked to one of them yesterday. He's a soccer coach who he has something called 8 to be great. And that's 8 minutes in every one of his practices where his players can pick anything they want to work on to be great at it. He's not telling them, think back to those orange and yellow boxes I just showed. He's not telling them, go get good at dribbling, go get good at crossing. He's saying, hey, you have 8 minutes. What do you want to be awesome at? What's a skill that if you worked on it for 8 minutes every day this week, you would shine when you play on the weekend? And then the third is relatedness. We all have a deep, deep, deep psychological need to belong. Like, this is one of the coolest things about being a part of a team. It's that intimate stuff that teams get to celebrate with each other in the locker room, and they get to share successes and also hardships together as well. But it's that feeling of we're in this together. And what underpins, I think it's important that we spend a couple minutes on this, because that scale I just showed, that continuum from amotivation to intrinsic motivation, and these three big, big factors of autonomy, competence, and relatedness, we as coaches we would be wise to keep at the forefront of our conversations with players that these are factors. These athletes that we have, they're human beings. A lot of times we view them as an athlete first, but they're humans, and they want to feel like they're connecting to things. They want to be awesome at stuff. And if we give them a chance to have a little bit of control over their journey as an athlete, they may surprise us. So why use MI? as I was putting together this presentation, these are just a couple experiences that I've had in the last 2 months alone. These are different things that athletes have brought to me. One, how do I be a better leader on this team? Two, should I transfer? I just told that story a moment ago. I don't understand my role on this team. Practices are boring and I go on autopilot. I had a player tell me that just a week ago. I'm not sure I'll ever fully recover from this injury. We've all had athletes, and maybe even some of us on our own, that know what it's like to be injured and know the psychological, social, and emotional toll that takes. And then even as recent as 2 days ago, this last one, my coaches don't trust me to get it done on the field. And so, zooming out, these are all questions of, sorry, I'm blocking my own screen here. Zooming out, these are all opportunities to help athletes improve decision making, discover their own reasons for doing something, work through plateaus, or probably one of the biggest ones I face is work through the ambivalence. Do I keep going? Is it worth it? Wow. It's a lot of sacrifice to play my sport and want to be great at it. And there's so much of us as the coaches who have kind of been through the other side of that and maybe experienced the benefits of long-term commitment and perseverance, where we want to tell those players, you have to keep going. Of course, this is worth it. Yes, this is a good use of your time. It's all going to pay off. But as you'll see in a minute, there are some big time benefits of resisting our own urge to share our opinion and our thoughts, and letting the player take some time to explore on their own what this journey means to them. And oh, by the way,
Okay, that's for me. Gotcha.
I'm doubly suffering from this, and what I mean by that is I have my own reflexes to resist when I'm working with an athlete, but I also have a son who plays competitive sport, so I have to be careful not to be a hypocrite with some of this stuff, because I'm watching my kid go through his own journey as well. So here's where we can kind of get into some of the basics of MI. And I think based on some of the reflections that I saw on Mentimeter earlier, some of you already have some experience with this. So I hope when we get into the Q&A later, those of you that are using MI already can kind of share what your experiences have been. So one thing you need to know about motivational interviewing is there are a lot of acronyms. First, we're going to go over the RULE acronym, and then we're going to go over the OARS acronym, and I'll probably talk about one more as well if we have some time. But at the core of MI, the first thing is resisting the writing reflex. Does anybody want to come off mute and take a guess at what the writing reflex is? Or put it in the chat?
I think that it is just constantly correcting over and over again. You got to let them experience failure to gain success. I think, that.
Yes. Yes, great. Thank you. Anybody else? Well, the first example we got, fantastic, that constant correction. I think the technical definition of the writing reflex, especially for us Americans or Western coaches, is we see something's going wrong, or we see somebody struggling or suffering, and we automatically, instinctively say, it's my job to make it right. It's my job to fix it. We're all familiar with the quote, don't just sit there, do something. We watch a player struggling. We see them upset after a loss, or they're late to practice, and that's not like them. And so we want to jump right in there and we want to solve it. And the opposite of that, this is a big time MI quote. It's not don't just sit there, do something. It's don't just do something, sit there. And what that means is let the player, help the player, guide the player as they work through this. And even after practicing MI for 10 years, I still find myself struggling as a player starts to share with me, Ben, this is going on in my life. I'll watch as my mind goes, you should do this. You should try that. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you think of that? And when I do that, that's me noticing there's my writing reflex alive and well. It's thriving. And it's my job to suppress it in that moment and allow the player to keep talking. What does that mean to you? Have you ever experienced anything like that before? What have you thought about already? And it's just setting them up to go. So number one, and we really could spend a lot of time talking about this, is we want to resist the writing reflex. It's alive in all, if not many of us. Two, it's understanding the U is understanding the athlete motivations. And we could probably come up with 20 different questions that would help us get there. But it's really trying to get the core of why do they do it. When I was with the Toronto Blue Jays, we had a Golden Glove winner who'd already made all the money in the world and had played in the major leagues for a really long time. He was in rehab, and he was coming back from a lower body injury. And I was talking with the player and just asked, what keeps you going? You've already accomplished so much and you've made a lot of money. What keeps you going? And he said, I want my son to see me win a World Series. And these are things that you just don't get to when you assume, well, he wants to get back there for this, or he wants to make it back for another contract year. And so basically we just need to ask. And then the L is listening with empathy. And I'm going to put my hand up right here, coaches, and tell you, college soccer coach Ben had no awareness of what this was like right here. I really viewed my players almost as an extension of my equipment. And I can honestly say there were few, if any, times where empathy was at the forefront. Thankfully, and after going through a lot of training in this, you can really learn. I do believe in the phrase, we get better at what we practice, is when we listen, we're all familiar with this, put ourselves in the shoes of another. When I'm listening to that injured athlete, I'm trying to understand what's it like to have not played a game in 2 months. What's it like to wonder if you're ever going to make it back? When I'm listening to an athlete say, my coaches don't trust me, I'm wondering what that's like to have a ton of self-belief and not have a coach give the nod and say, you go in there and play, or we want you to start. And so listening with empathy is the third part of the RULE acronym. And then fourth, it's empowering the athlete. And basically that's just with questions like, where do you think we should go from here? Or by the end of the week, what feels like the first step? It's really setting the athlete up to think about ways that they could solve their challenges. Or if we hear something called sustained talk, where they're going to keep moving in that direction, it's asking questions about how to keep that going as well. So that, in a nutshell, is the RULE acronym. The second, and these are some of the big 4 skills of motivational interviewing. The first is asking open-ended questions. And that's one of the things that I know for me has taken a lot of training, because typically as a coach, I would ask close-ended questions. Things like, how's it going? And your player will tell you good. And that's different than what's going on in your life. So asking open-ended questions is one of the first tools of MI. The second is affirmations. And what I want to really focus in on here, coach, is affirming is so different than praising. I'm proud of you means you've done something that I approve of. Affirming is really, I'll use my glasses as an example. It's putting these on as a strengths finder. So when I was talking with a 16-year-old athlete this morning that I work with, and I asked him, hey, tell me about your routine right now. And he said, Ben, 2 days a week, I wake up and go to individual training. And then 5 days a week, I have practice after school. And I'm also playing on a 4 versus 4 team. What I reflected to him is, you really sound committed to your sport and wanting to affirm that strength of commitment instead of saying, wow, your parents must be so proud of you. And there's a difference there between praising and affirming. Affirming can work the other way as well. I've had many conversations where an athlete is angry or ambivalent or anxious about something, and you can see it on their face. And to go up to that athlete and say, you're pissed, immediately they'll say, yeah, I'm upset. And it lets them know that you know how they're feeling and where they are. Affirming isn't just from a strengths perspective, but can also be affirming an emotion as well. And then the R is reflections. And for those of you that want to nerd out on this, there are about 5 or 6 different types of reflections that we can use. We can use a simple reflection where we just say back to an athlete what they told us. Oh, okay, you're not sure if your coach trusts you. We could use a double-sided reflection. On one side, you don't think your coaches trust you, but on the other side, you said they played you for 3 games in a row. So it's kind of sharing back a double-sided reflection to let them hear out loud some of the things that they're saying. You could use something called an amplified reflection. My coaches don't trust me. Yeah, your coaches are never going to give you a shot. And then they'll say, whoa, I didn't say that. Then they might back up and start to give evidence of where the coach does trust. So for anybody that's wants to nerd out on this stuff, there are about 5 or 6 different types of reflections that we can use to help our athletes go deeper. And then also as part of this collaborative conversation about change, we use summarizing. And for me, when I'm really in the zone and on my MI game, after a couple minutes of conversation, I might say something like, okay, Calvin, let me just say back what I've heard so far. You've played on this team for 6 months. There's been periods where you've been a starter. There's been times when you've been a sub. And lately, it feels like no matter what you do, your coaches don't trust you. What am I missing? And then that'll give a chance for the athlete to say, nothing, that's it. Or, oh, I also think this. So this is a dance that we can use. It's not linear. And what I mean by that is there's no rule saying you have to start with an open-ended question, or sometimes you can start with a summary. Hey, last time we talked, I remember we talked about this. And that lets the athlete know right away, whoa, my coach is listening to me. My coach knows what's going on in my life. And I also just want to put everybody at ease. If there's anybody who's never used any of these skills, or if this is the first time you're hearing about MI, that's great. We'll start right where we are. I know for me, when I first learned about this, I couldn't wait to go and try it out. My recommendation is just start simple. Maybe start with some open-ended questions and try those out and just notice what it feels like after a conversation with an athlete, how that goes. So the rule approach, the rule acronym, and then the OARS acronym. I'll talk really briefly. I might want to make sure that I leave some time for questions if people have them. There's one more acronym, and I don't have a slide for it, but I want to share it quickly with people. It's called PACE, P-A-C-E. I'll actually put it in the chat. And this is what's known as the spirit of motivational interviewing. Here's why this matters. If we don't channel the spirit of motivational interviewing, the RULE acronym and the OARS acronym that we just covered is nothing more than a cheap parlor trick. It's tools where there may be an agenda, but the spirit of MI is everything. The P stands for partnership. It's channeling the spirit of my coach is with me. The A stands for acceptance. That means that, hey, Megan, I take you as you are right now, not after you do these things, then I'll be ready to coach you. It's like this moment, right where you are in life, I'm accepting you for who you are. The C stands for compassion. This is not something that is probably thrown into our world as, hey, tell me about your coach. Oh, super compassionate. They love me so much. That's not something that probably describes many of us. I know if you ask my college guys, they'd be like, no chance. But this is something that we can practice. And then the E is evoking. It's our job to really evoke an athlete's reasons for making that change. I had a performer tell me recently when I asked him, hey, what does great support from me look like? They said, Ben, I ramble so much. Don't let me go down the rabbit hole. And I said, no. I said, when you go down the rabbit hole, we never know what we're going to find. And there could be some good stuff down there. So I just wanted to affirm that when I set him up to talk, he explores deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper why he feels things, what he wants out of his life. And that's where some of the gold is. The difference between maybe some traditional coaching styles and using MI is basically this. It's the difference between being a coach-centered, where it's sage on the stage, I have the info, I know the way, do what I say, and be more of a guide on the side, which is a lot more athlete-centered. We as coaches, as guides, we're still going to have opportunities to step out in front and say, I want to see more of this. And hey, on our team, I'd like it to be done this way. We're always still going to have a place to do that. It's just moving a little bit more of that guiding role where sometimes we're going to set our athletes up to be in the driver's seat. Just a couple more slides here. When are some good times to use it? Preseason. I talked to a college coach a week ago, and he and I set a goal that before preseason was over, he was going to check in with every player on his team at least twice. And it could be about soccer, but it didn't have to be about soccer. Post game, great time to check in. Bus trips, we all know those can be tough. I know for me, I didn't make enough trips to the back to sit with players and have conversations with them after an injury or during rehab. And then the question mark is really just fill in the blank. There's really no bad time to have these conversations about change. If anybody wants to take a screenshot, when I worked with the Blue Jays, this was a little quick kind of pocket tool that I created for our coaches on some ways that they could use motivational interviewing. And we talked about connection and open-ended questions and affirming strengths, and the C stood for choices, giving the athletes some autonomy, especially pro athletes that are going to have a say in how they want their career to go. And then the H stood for hear and hear, and hear as in HEAR, really hear what they're saying, but also hear in terms of really be present with the athlete when we're having those conversations. They can feel when they're getting our full attention, and they can feel when they're not getting our full attention. And then just as a reference, this book was a game changer for me. Strongly recommend it. It came out about 4 or 5 years ago. Stephen Rolnick is a friend of mine. He is one of the founders of motivational interviewing. And he's somebody that I spent a little bit of time with, having conversations about why this can be such a game-changing approach to coaching. And I'll just double down on what I said in the beginning in terms of this is stuff I wish I would have known more about earlier in my coaching journey. And it's one that I practice every day now working with athletes. And I love this quote from Dr. Rolnick as well. You're not the only wise person in the conversation as a helper. You're a guest in the person's world. And I try to remember how cool it is that we get to be invited in to these conversations with coaches or with our athletes. Sorry. And with that, just a couple things. First and foremost, thanks for coming today. Second, if you would scan that QR code, Saxton, do you want to talk about what happens if they scan the QR code?
Yeah, absolutely. So if everyone wants to scan that, we are going to give away a prize pack to a random submission from the survey. So scan the QR code, fill out the survey, and then you will automatically be entered to win a prize pack. And we will contact you this afternoon for your address and your size, and we will get that shipped out to you this week.
Thank you, Saxton.
Absolutely. In the meantime, we have a question in the chat. Do we want to jump to that?
I think after all this talk about compassion and empathy and listening to others, I think it's the right thing to do. So fire away.
Perfect. So the question asks, how can the team, not only the coach, help fill the emotional tank?
Oh, that's good. Do a team session. Ask that question to the team. Questions like, what gets you down? When do you feel stuck? My favorite question that I've asked athletes, even pro athletes, are, what are the words you need to hear the most? There's a really cool story out there. Any of you can find it, about Andy Murray, the tennis player. And somebody had taken a shot on their cell phone of a note that he had written to himself. And it had some motivational and tactical and physical reminders that he had written to himself before he played. And I love the question, what are the words you need to hear the most? What does great support from your teammates look like? I've done exercises with teams where I've used sticky notes and said, hey, I want everybody to go around the locker room and something that you think is awesome about Tim, or something that's awesome about Beth or Jerry, write it on the sticky note, put it on their back. And then I'd have the athletes stick those in their bag or in their lockers. I've done this with pro players. I mean, I love my friend told me he works at Chick-fil-A. He said, Ben, how do you know if somebody needs encouragement? I said, I don't know, Jim, how? He said, they're breathing. And it's true. We all need it. And I would do that with your staffs as well. I wouldn't just do it with your athletes. As coaches, we can get stuck as well. And, being vulnerable about, hey, when I'm down, remind me of this, or say this to me. That can be helpful. Great question.
Awesome. The next one's a pretty easy one. Can you please share the Blue Jays slide again? Perfect. Awesome. Leave that up for a second. Cool. Well, that is the last question we have in the chat at the moment. People probably busy filling out that quick survey, entering to win the prize pack. So we'll give everyone another minute or two so they can hopefully hop back. Michael asked, will these slides be downloadable?
Saxton, if I send you the presentation, you can send it out to everybody that came today.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, last thing I'd have, one, just grateful again for everybody showing up today. And I hope I'd ask everybody to visit our website as well, www.rsrcoaching.com. Myself and my team, I have 3 other sport and performance psychology professionals that have worked with the military, played pro sports, coached in pro sports. We do a lot of independent work. And if anybody's interested in jumping on a call with me to talk about your own process as a coach, I do a lot of work with coaches, or doing work with your team. That's a conversation that I'd love to have. My email address is right in there, bencfreakley@gmail.com. And I'd love to hear from you. And thanks for the feedback on the presentation today as well.